When our last segment of this lecture ended, we were looking at when aggression tends to occur. Now we will pick up with that list by adding the use of alcohol. Many studies show that alcohol increases aggression, heightens sexual interest, and weakens inhibitions against aggressive behavior. In the date rape study, male college students listened to a recording of a simulated date rape. Their task was to designate when the man should stop further sexual advances with the woman. Under the influence, they took significantly longer. No other stable, industrialized country in the world comes even close to the United States in terms of the prevalence of guns used in violent crimes. Guns, of course, are only the instrument. It's the people who pull the trigger, right? But social psychologist Leonard Berkowitz wondered if guns were, in fact, that neutral. He hypothesized that the mere presence of a weapon can automatically trigger aggressive thoughts and feelings and therefore increase aggression. In the weapon effect study, he had a Confederate provoke male participants who were later given a chance to retaliate by allegedly giving the Confederate electrical shocks. On the table near the shock apparatus, there were some objects allegedly left from a previous experiment. For half of the participants, they were a revolver and a rifle. For the other half, a badminton racket and shuttlecocks. The presence of weapons significantly increased the degree of shocks administered. As Berkowitz put it, the finger pulls the trigger, but the trigger may also be pulling the finger. Arousal can increase aggression even if it is misattributed. This is called excitation transfer. One of the earliest discoveries of excitation transfer was the bridge study. Researchers had an attractive female approach males on a rope bridge or a stable bridge, a rope bridge being like that, pictured here. Both were over a deep ravine. So she approached these guys when they were walking alone and about halfway across this rope bridge. She asked them to answer a couple of questions, allegedly for a survey, then told them to feel free to call her if they had any questions later, leaving them with a phone number, allegedly hers. But the phone number was to an answering machine that was set up in the lab for this purpose, with her voice on the outgoing message. Which group of men do you think were significantly more likely to call? The ones who encountered her on the rope bridge. Apparently, the additional arousal experienced on an unstable bridge was transferred to the experience of encountering her. But this was misattribution of sexual or attraction type arousal. Can excitation transfer increase aggression? The physical exercise study, the first of many like it, found that excitation transfer from physical exercise increased aggression in male college students. Other studies have found many sources of arousal increased aggression, including noise, violent movies, arousing music, and heat. Now, heat is an interesting case because most people guess that heat would reduce arousal when it actually increases it. And this makes heat particularly vulnerable to excitation transfer. In other words, misattribution. Now, who aggresses? Social psychology stresses the fact that anyone can be driven to aggression if sufficiently provoked by the situation. In other words, we are all vulnerable. However, some are more easily provoked than others. Correlational studies have discovered a number of links to aggression, including genetics. Behavioral geneticists often use adoptive and twin studies to investigate if behavior has a hereditary component. The results of these studies with aggression are mixed. There appears to be a small genetic component, but aggressive tendencies appear to be mostly learned. Testosterone. Higher levels of testosterone have been found to be linked to aggressive behavior, even in females. So, do you happen to know what movie this picture is from? It's the movie The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. However, it's the original Swiss version, which, by the way, is rated much higher than the American one. Finger length is also related to aggression, believe it or not. Take a look at your left hand, not your right, your left, okay? Which is longer, your index finger, sometimes called your pointing finger, or your ring finger? Believe it or not, having a taller index finger than ring finger, as indicated in the slide image on the far right, has been linked with aggression. There is also a neurochemical link to aggression. The neurotransmitter serotonin is associated with impulse control, so it's not surprising that low levels of serotonin are associated with aggression. Drugs that boost serotonin levels can reduce aggression. One of them is even being used now to reduce road rage. What is this a picture of? It's a picture of a synaptic cleft, also known as a synaptic gap between neurons. There is also a lobe functioning link to aggression. Which lobe of the brain is involved in impulse control? And that would be the prefrontal lobe. Executive functioning occurs here, and it's just as it sounds. It's like a business executive in charge of higher level things, in this case, planning or inhibiting actions. A person with a brain injury here can still bake a cake, but cannot plan to bake a cake. So to continue our business executive metaphor, the workers can still do their jobs, but the executive supervisor can no longer do hers. Poor executive functioning has been correlated with aggression. Who do you think aggresses the most, males or females? That depends. Males aggress more physically, females more non-physically. What are some non-physical examples? Do you remember? Slandering, gossip, ostracism, ridiculing, the silent treatment, etc. As recently as 1996, there was a gender difference with swearing, with men engaging more than women. More recent research, however, shows that this gap is closed or is close to closing. Apparently, some women can also swear like a freaking trucker. Finally, some personalities are more easily provoked than others. Two personality traits in particular are indicated. The first is high impulsivity, defined as difficulty controlling thoughts and behaviors. High impulsivity is linked with aggression. Second is narcissism. Now, you might think that narcissists have strong self-esteem, but high and strong are two different things. Their self-esteem is high, but it is weak. They are very thin-skinned because their ego or self-esteem depends on others revering, respecting, and looking up to them. When others don't, and it doesn't take much to set this off, their ego is highly threatened, and they are particularly vindictive. Acts of aggression, then, help them to restore their weak self-esteem. So self-esteem has two dimensions, high or low, and weak and strong. Can you think of someone with high, weak self-esteem? How about a high, strong one? And this brings us to questionnaire number 11. This is your score on aggression. How does it compare to the U.S. student mean of 52? That's 5.2. If your score is much above that, which of the factors on this prior slide do you think are relevant to you? This slide, the one we just finished.